morning, everybody. Happy to see you all here today. I'm going to be following up on Asher's discussions of where permits are not required. In many, maybe even most situations, work permits definitely are required. And as a result of all the crazy negotiations that have been going on with NAFTA, I just wanted to mention that under NAFTA 2.0, or USMCA we call it, there have been no changes to the list of professions that are acceptable under this new NAFTA that work permits are available for. Degreed professionals, they did not change the list in any way, which happens to be very nice. A lot of the clients were concerned that there could be some modifications. Other clients were upset that there were no improvements, but the bottom line is that's what we're stuck with, and so it's business as usual regarding NAFTA work permits. Now, as you probably all know, NAFTA work permits only applies to Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans. So what I'm going to be talking about is a much more common category, which we are involved with all the time, and that's intercompany transfers. So how do we define intercompany transfers? Well, this can be worldwide, and you've got companies that have branch offices or subsidiaries or affiliates in one country and another, and you want to transfer. Certain kinds of people can be transferred and will get a work permit. So the real question is, who is eligible for this? Well, the first thing is you have to be working 1 year in your home company, minimum of 1 year. That's a requirement that allows you to be transferred. Then they break it down into two categories: managerial and specialized knowledge. And this is where it gets a little tricky. I mean, managerial is fairly standard, easy to understand. Specialized knowledge workers tend to be a little bit more technical. But this happens on a regular basis, and especially as companies are moving people around for a variety of reasons, one of the things we get involved in is trying to isolate who might be eligible, what kind of documentation is necessary to prove and support the eligibility. And is there a qualifying relationship? Because sometimes we're questioned and say, well, can I send him to my office, let's say from anywhere in the world to Canada? We have to make sure that there's a relationship, an ownership relationship. It's all kinds of definitions in terms of affiliation and subsidiaries. Once that is met, then of course, at least you can meet the basic qualifications and start transferring people. The person who's working with you has to, as I said, has to have been working at least 1 year in the home company. So this is where NAFTA in the North American context helps, because you don't have to have that 1 year requirement. So very often we've been asked, well, okay, I have this guy, he just started working for us, and he happens to be an engineer. Can I send him to Canada under contract? Well, you can't, because if he qualifies under NAFTA, there's no requirement. But if he doesn't have a degree, he's a technologist and may not fit under NAFTA, but then you've got to make sure he's been working for you for a year. That's a key part of all this. And in addition to all this, of course, all the general rules do apply. I mean, criminality, medical. I mean, if in fact there's something wrong with this person, and we see this a lot from American applicants with DUIs. DUIs in the States are not treated as the same way as here, and they tend to get caught. So we've counseled our employers to the extent that they are allowed to, they need to make some inquiries as to what the person's background is. And that's basically how intercompany works. Now, documentation, that's, again, a bugaboo, because when you come to the border, and most of these are done by the border, but some will be done, we do a lot of these at visa offices as well. They're really looking for evidence to substantiate anything that you're talking about. So how are you going to document the relationship between a subsidiary and a parent, or a branch and affiliate? That's where the paperwork comes in. And the paperwork requires to show generally ownership from one to the other, or all the definitions that apply to affiliation, majority control, things like that. So that's what the officers are going to look at to make sure the basic requirement for affiliation is there. And we like to describe what that relationship is. I mean, it's one thing to back it up with share certificates. It's another thing to show a website that lists all the various subsidiaries around the world and how a company is very international. So that's helpful. then we need to be able to substantiate individuals' current job, current position in the home country. In other words, what do they do? What was their education? What kind of experience have they got? For managerial, not too difficult. Most of them have worked up the ranks and become management. It's easy to do a lateral transfer in a managerial position. But what do you do about someone who is an IT specialist? Okay, they've had a lot of specific training. They've worked for the company for a few years. What makes them specialized? And this is where some officers get very technical. So, you look into things like proprietary knowledge, things that they've acquired through many years of understanding operations, software, and certain programs that belong to the company. And that is something that's just not generally out in the marketplace. And that way you can allege and claim that this is necessary to improve the Canadian office, train Canadians, and that's why this person has to come here. So that's an important feature. The other thing, of course, is you have to outline what the job duties are going to be in Canada. What is this guy coming to do here? How is he equipped based on his experience to do that job here? That's another part of the documentation, and the resumes, support letters from the employer, all that helps. And the duration is somewhat flexible. I mean, we haven't seen any issues with people being transferred and assuming qualified for 2 years, maybe even 3 years. That's never been a real problem. So the key to this whole area of law, or any area where you actually need a work permit and are going to apply for one, is evidence. The better supporting evidence you have, the better chance you're going to be successful. Okay, now the second part of my presentation happens to be very current. I mean, the reason I'm talking about this, not that we're criminal lawyers or anything, but this has been something that has been on our plate for a while now, since the whole thing has gone on with this cannabis business in Canada. And we are asked about it on a regular and continuing basis. So I've just put together a few little crib sheets as to what is going on. The evidence that I'm presenting here, the information, all comes from the government, from the Canada Border Services Agency, from the American Customs Border Protection. These guys are all putting out memo after memo after memo because nobody really knows how to deal with this. And it's evolving. And it's evolving to the point that even last week, things changed. So let's talk about the concerns about crossing the border. I mean, the bottom line is, and some people have asked me, well, it's legal in Colorado, it's legal in Washington State, it's legal in California. Why can't I go back and forth with that? Well, as we've been told, the border is under federal control. Federal U.S. control on the U.S. side. They don't accept any of this. For them, and they're starting to make a big deal about this in the press because they don't want the word to get out there, that it's not legal. Marijuana is not considered legal according to the feds, and they intend to enforce that. So all we're telling all our people is you got to be prepared because you might be asked. And when this whole thing started to get serious a few weeks ago, people were hearing stories or telling stories of being stopped because they owned stock in cannabis companies. They worked for cannabis companies, and the border officers weren't sure what to do. Some people were being banned for life. So these are the issues that face when you cross into America. Now, what about coming back? Okay, coming back into Canada, it's not much better because the legalization in Canada is only within Canada, only for internal use, and only transportation within Canada. You can't bring it back from wherever, whether it's America or Amsterdam or whatever. You cannot do that. The other issue is what is the amount you can carry. I was told 30 grams is equivalent to about an ounce. That's the only thing I can understand, and that's all you're allowed. And there's different minimum legal ages from province to province. So even within Canada, this is a whole evolving area that we have to be aware of. Now, what are the Americans doing? The U.S. Customs and Border Patrol has an evolving website that is changing regularly. There was a very big concern that seemed to have been dealt with last week. The first and the most important official word that they said, and this applies to everybody, is we're going to examine everybody under their own circumstances. So the bottom line is each person is subject to be questioned, no matter what. But the issue that came up regularly and seemed to be addressed last week, that recently, was that they're now going to look aside. If you work in the cannabis industry in any shape or form, but you're coming to America for holiday, vacation, nothing to do with the cannabis industry, they are generally going to allow you in. We use the word generally because you're still subject to other issues of past criminality or whatever it might be. So the key point is, if you are coming for a vacation, you seem to be okay. On the other hand, if you're going to go to see a cannabis company because you're looking to sell equipment, I had one client call me up. He's in the business of making glass jars that they store this stuff in Canada, and he wants to sell them to the States. You go down there and you try to do that, if that's the purpose you're going for, they won't let you in. You know, they have this wording that they call it aiding and abetting the marijuana industry, which is illegal, so they won't let that in. So the Canadian government has reinforced it by saying, do not carry anything over the border. And that is the mantra that we're all operating under. And so then the Canadian facilities, the agency, the border agency, turns around and says, just remember, you can't bring it back in to Canada. No matter where you got it, no matter how legal or illegal it was, even medical marijuana cannot be transported over the border. Now, the interesting comment that the Canadian Border Authority told us was, if you accidentally, that's in quotes, you have it in your car, intentionally, unintentionally, somebody forgot it there or whatever, you're actually better off to declare it and tell the officer, oh yeah, whoops, found it here, because they'll seize it, but they won't charge you if you declare it. If in fact you have to, you're caught without declaring it, you could be charged, with attempting to smuggle it. So these are the evolving things that happen all the time. A couple of the examples that we had to deal with or were told all about was investing. What if you're an investment in U.S. marijuana companies? That has resulted in people being barred entry. Again, this stuff is probably going to change. As thing happens, these are going to change. Looking to sell agricultural equipment that is involved, in the cannabis business. No, this person was barred for life. And of course, there's that famous story from way back when. It's a Canadian Olympian who was banned from the U.S. because he admitted to smoking or using marijuana. Again, we don't really know to what extent these things are going to change. Everybody keeps telling me, yes, they will. We're going to get into a series of having a portfolio of information and documentation that's going to give people more guidance. But at the moment now, for sure, caution is the most important thing. So what do you do? What do you tell as an employer, what do you tell your clients? They need to evaluate the risks. They know what they've done. They know, what their past history is. Are they involved? Do they have shares in cannabis, which in my opinion shouldn't mean anything, but if they're involved in any kind of business that could be deemed assisting American companies in this business, this famous aiding and abetting, declaration could come up and saying if you're aiding and abetting the U.S. marijuana industry, well, then you're going to be banned. And the bottom line is, do not bring back anything into Canada. The border, as someone mentioned, is a very thin line in this thing, in this scenario. The bottom is, it's not acceptable either way, and they don't want us moving it around. And let the situation evolve as time passes. As Asher said, today is day one. Okay, so that's really what I had to say. Now we're going to have a short coffee break, and we'll continue afterwards. Okay, thank you very much.